Hey, this is Mark Powell from Powell Not Found, and this is the home of the Powell Not Found podcast. A podcast where we talk about the things, well, I want to talk about. I know, it's a little self-serving. On this podcast, we're talking baseball, we're talking New York Yankees, we're talking comedy, we're talking video games, we're talking, well, things I want to talk about. Again, it's a very self-serving premise. In order to grow this channel into what I want it to become, I'm going to need a little bit of your help though. If you can go to the YouTube channel and hit subscribe and go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the show, every little bit will count. Who knows, maybe we can take this podcast from a one-man show in someone's apartment to filling up Yankee Stadium with people hungry for content. Again, I'm trying to keep the goals attainable. New episodes are out every single Sunday at 8 a.m. And thank you guys for watching the show.
So she's been dancing to the music blaring from the Renegade.
Everybody, on this episode of the Powell Not Found podcast, we're talking Hall of Fame, we're talking the BeeKeeper with Jason Statham, and we're talking about the little bit of time I spent with the Prince of Persia, the Lost Crown video game out by Ubisoft earlier, a couple weeks ago. But first, let's get that intro started, and let's hit it.
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast tea. She knew her birthday was getting corona.
Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the Powell Not Found podcast. We finally made it to the end of January, and man, did the weather change. It went from basically snowing one day to 75 degrees and maybe beach weather in a 24-hour period here where I live, and it is kind of wreaking havoc a little bit on everybody's health and well-being, but glad to be back with you here. We're finishing up January. We finally made a month worth of podcasts for you, which is an accomplishment for me. I think ultimately getting past that third episode, I think, was the hump that I needed to figure out whether, are we doing this, am I doing this for the rest of the year? Am I going to stick with this habit? This is usually the time where I'm going to say, maybe there's no time for it, but I have made time, and we're going to be talking about some interesting subjects. But first, we have some housekeeping to attend to. The podcast, as always, is available on the YouTube channel Powell Not Found, and you can type in Powell Not Found podcast, and you can get to the channel. Go ahead and subscribe. We have some earlier video series that I tried when I was living in New York, and we've got some, Me and My Melon series, which is always kind of fun. We have 8 episodes of that, but this is where we're archiving the video version of the podcast. But in exciting news, the podcast is on Apple Podcasts now, so you can listen to this thing if you want to. Endure is not the right word. If you want to listen, enjoy, not endure. I guess it depends on what point of view you're coming from. But if you want to enjoy the podcast on your morning commute, if you want to listen to it, that would be greatly appreciated. Go over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the show. I think that's how it works. I think that's how you get more popular. I would imagine the more activity that is surrounding your podcast, the better when it comes to this kind of stuff. But yeah, I actually, for a long time, I always felt like it was so weird to see everybody's podcast up on the feed there. And I was like, how does this happen? Turns out it's a pretty simple process. Turns out I just, lived 34 years and didn't realize RSS feeds were a thing. But we're up there. We're on it. And so, yeah, it would help. Every single subscriber would help if you're enjoying the show. And the bigger the audience goes, the bigger the more things we can do with this show. So yeah, and we also cut a commercial, which has been kind of plastered all over my feed. So hopefully I'm not annoying anybody there. But cut a commercial, try a little call to action, and because that's what you're supposed to do as a YouTuber. I figured a commercial from me is a lot better than some of the commercials that you do hear on podcasts, some of those ads. So let's start with that one. And yeah, maybe we'll do more. It was kind of fun. It was like an hour putting that thing together. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. There's typos all over that thing too on second look. But that's what happens when you edit a video at like 9 o'clock at night. So anyways, we're talking Hall of Fame this episode. It's early January, so the Hall of Fame voting ends up being basically a big issue in January because that's when the writers vote. Let me see if I can actually fix this composition here. Boom, 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 boom. And bam, there we go. Shoop, shoop. There we go. All right, and we're going to fade to the picture-in-picture. And this January, basically, the writers have voted 3 former players into the Hall of Fame. Adrian Beltre, longtime Seattle Mariner, longtime Dodger. I was looking over his stats. He was a Boston Red Sox for a year. I just do not remember that happening. Kind of vaguely maybe remember him in Fenway, but, man, that must have been quick. And then finishing out, I believe, his career in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. Always had kind of impressive numbers. Todd Helton, the longtime Colorado Rocky, voted in with 79.7% of the vote. You can see here from this graphic from ESPN. And Joe Mauer, the famous Twins catcher, getting into the Hall of Fame with 76.1% of the vote. If you're not familiar with the actual Hall of Fame voting, the writers, the Baseball Writers of America, they have to vote 75% to get in they have to get 75% of the vote to actually get into the Hall of Fame. And so this year, the voting, Beltre, Helton, and Joe Mauer getting in. Billy Wagner just missing. I imagine with future ballots, he's probably going to get in, joining some pretty elite closers in Trevor Hoffman and Mariano Rivera, who are some of the recent people to kind of get in the game. But Billy Wagner, famous Astro, I want to say he was on the Phillies as well during those World Series runs in 2008 and 2009. But yeah, these numbers are really impressive from these guys. I feel old looking at some of these names, and I'm sure every single baseball fan goes through this feeling when they see their former players that they grew up watching all of a sudden start giving these speeches. I felt it in 2014 when Derek Jeter retired. I felt a little something of my, childhood disappear a little bit because he was the baseball guy that I looked to when I was playing and to model all of my playing after. And some of these names now are just too familiar. And you start seeing that generation. When I started watching baseball I want to say it was like 1998, 99, when things kind of came online. I remember flashes of those World Series with the Braves and the Padres and the Yankees. Names like Todd Helton were around the league. Todd Helton was known for 300 average and, a great hitter, getting on base, and people would criticize him even at the time for being at Colorado in Coors Field and having that Coors Field effect. Joe Mauer was a little bit obviously later. Adrian Beltre feels like he spanned like 40 decades for some reason. He just always felt like he was there. But these names are just all too familiar getting into the Hall of Fame. Gary Sheffield has been on the ballot for a little while. I don't think they tell you here on this graphic how long he's been on, maybe 4th or 5th time or something, 6th time, 10th time. But Gary Sheffield, Andrew Jones, Carlos Beltran, Alex Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, these are the people that I grew up watching play baseball. These are the guys that define baseball in my mind. A lot of them, for better or for worse. But Alex Rodriguez on the Yankees, Manny Ramirez with David Ortiz on the Boston Red Sox. I mean, those teams were formidable. And I can say this with enough time that's gone by. But that 2003, 2004 Red Sox team with David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez, they were the better team on the field. I mean, that 2003 ALCS probably should have been won by the Boston Red Sox, but they were the great players. Chase Utley on the Phillies, Omar Vizquel, Bobby Abreu, Jimmy Rollins, and Andy Pettitte. And as these talks go on in early January, as we always see, the Hall of Fame just continues to get dominated by the same conversation it does every year with this group of players coming on. Because not only snubbing, it looks like you have Gary Sheffield, Alex Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, Andy Pettitte are the ones that stand out that have admitted steroid use. And every single January, this topic comes up as whether they should be in the Hall of Fame. And the conversation is going to be dominated by that until these guys are off the ballot in 10 years, or whether they decide to put all these players in. And as the years go by, and as we get a little bit separated from the era that defined the steroid era, the era that includes the Barry Bonds home run breaking record, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, Jose Canseco, as we get away from this juiced era of baseball, to me, it seems like it makes less and less sense to not at least admit these players just for their talents away from the steroid use, right? They cheated the game. I get it. But we're also only 7 years, we're 7 years removed from the Houston Astros scandal. They didn't take the World Series away. That's still a World Series as good as the Dodgers won in 2020, as good as the Braves in 2021, as good as the Nationals in 2019. They're not taking that away. So it does seem like the writers at this point are personally kind of biased towards these players, and they should be. I mean, they did cheat the game. There's no doubt about that. But I think this brings up a good question about what exactly is the Hall of Fame, right? And the more and more I thought about it this week, the more and more I started to realize that the Hall of Fame is really just the Oscars, right, for baseball. It's the Emmys. It's the Golden Globes, right? It is the writers appointing who they think are the best image of what baseball actually is, right? Because if you look at Cooperstown as a history of the game, right, then you're basically creating this Swiss cheese tableau of what Major League Baseball is by not admitting these players that played in this era, right? You're essentially getting up to about like the mid-'80s, mid-'90s, and just plucking them out the way public schools pluck out religion, right, from the public curriculum, right? You get there, and then all of a sudden you don't have it, right? When I went to Cooperstown when I was younger, let me actually push back to full screen here. When I went to Cooperstown when I was younger, went up to New York and went through the Hall of Fame. When you go into that museum, right, what they're presenting you with is a history of the game, right? And they have the stats up there. I think I even remember at some point, because I think Bonds had broken, maybe Bonds was getting close, right? Or maybe it was Pete Rose. There was some sort of stat that was somebody banned from the Hall of Fame that they still had up there. I think it was probably the all-time hits record from Pete Rose, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember even commenting myself and said, oh, he got into the Hall of Fame after all, right? Because they do present it, those 3 floors that they had in Cooperstown. And again, this is like 15 years ago, so like things could have changed. But when you go through the halls and you start seeing the uniforms and you start seeing the on display, and you start seeing the stats and the balls and the World Series rings and stuff, what they're presenting to you is a history of the game, right? And to not have these guys in anymore, it's just it's just kind of a disservice to anybody trying to kind of get the full experience, I think, at some point, right? You have to admit, everyone knows that the steroid era happened. It seemed like it was rampant. It seemed like one steroid guy was hitting against another steroid guy. So what's the difference at some point, right? If everybody was juicing during that era, right? And some people weren't, but if the vast majority of people were, then at some point you just have to say, hey, it was an era of the game, but we're not going to tarnish these stats. They didn't throw away the stats, right? They didn't kind of say, okay, no, Bonds doesn't have the home run record anymore. Pete Rose doesn't have the hits record. They kept all those, right? Because stats are like the holy grail in baseball. But they're going to keep him out of this hall. They're going to keep him away from a ceremony that lasts all but 6 seconds. They're going to not give him that viral moment that goes every single year in January of a player picking up the phone 5 years after retiring and getting into the Hall of Fame. They're robbing them of that moment. But what you're really robbing, I think, are the people that actually go to Cooperstown, right, thinking that they're going to get an entire history of the game, and they're not going to see players enshrined in there that really made a big impact to the game. You're going to tell me Roger Clemens didn't make an impact to the game? You know, essentially changed the way the Red Sox were in Boston in the mid-'80s, right? You know, led them to that 86 World Series, you know, as a young player. Changed the way the Yankees rotation was. Won all those Cy Young's strikeout record. I think he's number 3, number 4. You're going to tell me he doesn't have an impact in the game past the alleged steroid use? I don't think so. But again, that's not what the Hall of Fame actually is. The Hall of Fame is the Golden Globes. They're the Oscars. They're actors voting on the best actor, right? It's baseball writers voting on what they think encapsulates baseball. And I think, just judging, if we go back actually to the ESPN graphic of all the voting, the interesting thing about this is that they're getting a pretty good sizable chunk of the vote, right? So maybe you are seeing that shift happen. And personally, seeing Barry Bonds and Gary Sheffield and Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa hit home runs in the 1990s, in the late 1990s, that was fun. That was when baseball was the most entertaining. They've been doing all of these things to try to speed up the game, try to make it more interesting to a different demographic. But when you see someone who looks like a cartoon character who Warner Brothers sketched out hit a ball 7,000 feet into the stratosphere, that is when baseball was more fun. I mean, one time I was watching a game, I think it was on the Superstation when they had the Braves on the Superstation. I believe it was John Rocker, and I have no idea, but John Rocker was huge, right? I have no idea there was steroids there. Who knows, right? And who knows if about any of these guys, right? But he was huge, ripped, coming out of the bullpen. I mean, he looked like a bulldog coming out of the bullpen, right? Baseball was at its most fun when people were allegedly cheating. It is, I'm not saying to bring steroids back into the game, but if you really want to drive numbers, some of the balls that Barry Bonds would hit, I remember there was some clip a long time ago where Barry Bonds was hitting with an aluminum bat. I think the ball is still going. There's a ball that he hit at Yankee Stadium. It was like into the third deck, right? Like, it was unbelievable. Some of the shots. Like, don't give me Shohei Ohtani. Don't give me Aaron Judge. Don't give me Giancarlo Stanton. Give me Barry Bonds on the most steroids hitting a baseball. That is the most fun baseball will ever be. But anyway, going back to this voting, Gary Sheffield, again, another monster at the plate who is involved in the Clear scandal, and I think that's what's holding him out. Again, 63.9% of the vote. And again, seeing Gary Sheffield's bat waggle was probably one of the more fun moments in baseball you could watch because you never knew. When he would hit something, it would go for miles. Gary Sheffield was so impactful to me as a young player that when I started hitting, and when I started hitting really well when I was younger, and I would go to the cage constantly, I started imitating Gary Sheffield's bat waggle. And for those people listening, basically he would kind of like loosely keep the bat in his hands, and he would kind of like wave it almost like a fan in front while waiting for the pitch. And he would have a high leg kick, and he would coil himself up. And when the ball came, his bat speed was so good that he could just unleash the coil. And I started doing that on a baseball field when I was younger. And man, did it make a difference. I mean, it was quite the difference in just travel and just the amount of power I got behind the ball. It was something that I wish I continued trying to figure out. maybe I'd be playing baseball instead of recording a podcast. But what a difference you can make just by coiling that swing like that. But again, what a great player. What a fun player. It was a difference maker on the Yankees roster for those years that he was on it. And on the Marlins, on the Dodgers. He played for all these certain teams. He deserves it. This is his last year on the ballot, and I think that his only way in at this point is like by executive, like an executive decision by the baseball writers to basically, put him in after the fact once he's no longer eligible for voting. I don't know if that happens very often. I feel like there hasn't been many of those. Maybe Fred McGriff was one of them that I think probably fell off the ballot unjustly. But for anything, we're getting to a point, I think, too, as well, and then I'll wrap up the subject, where the Hall of Fame numbers seem to be kind of changing. These ones, if you look at the stats here, Joe Mauer, you're talking 306 batting average, almost 1,000 RBIs. We got a slugging percentage of .439 and .827 OPS and around 2,100 hits. And for a guy that only played 15 years, I mean, if you're talking about you're playing 5 more years, you start compiling some stats that look pretty impressive. And I think that 300 batting average, I think a lifetime goes a long way. I think with writers being, as old as they are, I don't think that they're looking at those new generation stats going, oh, OPS, well, what's his WAR? No, they're looking at batting average, right? They're looking at those stats that matter. Adrian Beltre is more impressive and kind of a little bit confusing about why he stopped, right? Like you look at 3,000 hits, 3,166 hits, 477 home runs, a 286 batting average, and an 819 OPS. This is one of those careers where you start going, I know all those people want to go back to their family. I know all those people want to, have a more normal life. I know baseball travel is hard. But when you're 23 home runs away from 500, don't you just say like, I'll just stick around for a couple years, just to get that? He would have been the 8th player all time to have 3,000 hits and 500 home runs if he stuck around a little bit. The biggest one that I think is just a crime. I think it was Alex Rodriguez that stopped like 4 shy of 700. It's like, Alex, just do it. Like, do the Mr. 3000 thing. Come back, be Bernie Mac, come back, hit those 4 dingers, and then get out, right? Like, you still have time. We all see Alex on the Fox network. You still can play. You still can play. So get in there, man. The Yankees need a third baseman. Let's go. But anyways, and Todd Helton, let's finish up with him, and then we'll take a quick break here. 2,500 hits, 369 home runs, a 316 batting average. We're never going to see these numbers again. Just to be clear, if baseball continues the way that it is and hitting doesn't adjust to the elite pitching, we're never going to see these numbers again. 316? Just to give you an example, I know it was a bad year. Giancarlo Stanton hit 1 91 last year. 316. Forget Ted Williams. We're never going to see a consistent lifetime batting average at 300 again. Never. Never. Maybe Luis Ariz. Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, the Baseball Hall of Fame, every January, this will be basically the conversation that will be dominating the landscape. They should just let them all in, to be honest. I don't think anybody really cares anymore. Maybe but you know, when we're playing in a post Houston Astros landscape, I don't think anybody cares. But we'll see. We'll take a quick break here, and we're going to come back a little bit with the BeeKeeper. We went a little bit long on that thing. Maybe we'll talk a little bit of football, just because the conference championship is this weekend between the Niners and the Lions, and we've got the Ravens and the Chiefs, and we have Mahomes in Baltimore, and this has got to be the greatest sports weekend or sports year for Baltimore. The Orioles, the Ravens, man, things are going well for the state of Maryland. Anyways, all right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back in about 30 seconds. All righty. Let's hit it.
She brewed some Irish breakfast. Did you know her birthday?
Welcome back. And this time, that was the first time I did that transition, so it was a little bit messy, but figure as time goes on, we'll get a little bit better. Thank you. We are back. We're going to be talking The BeeKeeper a little bit, a new movie from Jason Statham that is in theaters, maybe out of theaters by the time I talk about this. It might be a little bit late. But we are talking that. But before we do that, let's actually kind of split. If you're listening to the podcast, we were just finishing up talking about the Hall of Fame and who was voted in and who's continuing to be voted out of the Hall of Fame. And during that week, the Yankees made a announcement that they're going to change their uniform, which is not something that happens all the time. And this is from the Bleacher Report, I believe. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is from Uniwatch.com. My bad. And let me cut to this here. And the Yankees are making a change to their uniform, to their road uniform. So, as previously worn by the team, the Yankees would have road grays, and they have, obviously, white pinstripes at home. And they have not, and they've kind of changed their uniform in different ways in years past. They've tightened up lettering and all that kind of stuff. They've changed, obviously, type of uniform from like cloth or, at some point the uniform started looking like Major League Baseball uniforms. But before that, it seemed like everybody's baseball uniform was made from like surplus Confederate uniforms. It was they were so heavy and wool-like. It was like, I don't know whether they're playing baseball or they're getting ready to fight for General Lee. It was there's a picture down here. Let me just scroll down. That uniform worn by Mickey Mantle. This is a picture for those of you listening. A picture of Mickey Mantle wearing an old New York Yankee road uniform. Again, looks like a Union Confederate uniform from the Civil War, and looks so heavy. I mean, Mickey probably would have had 1,000 home runs if they just gave him something that was a little bit more breathable. But in other news, so basically they're changing their uniform. They're taking away the white stroke of their New York lettering, and they're changing the number in the back, also taking away the stroke, and they had some piping around the actual sleeves of their uniform that they're taking away. And in a historic move, the Yankees somehow decided to make their uniforms more boring than they already were, and it's a puzzling move. The whole, I mean, the Yankees, I love the Yankees. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of the Yankees. I love watching the team every single year. But sometimes their decisions puzzle me a little bit. We have an environment in Major League Baseball that everyone and their brother, all these teams are getting new City Connect jerseys. Why? To sell jerseys to you, the consumer, right? There's no other reason to do it. And the Yankees decide, you know what? We're not going to get City Connect. We're going to actually make our design more plain. We're going to take away, you like all the fancy strokes, the fancy white strokes, the fancy piping, the things that make it look good? No. We're going to take that away. Like, was this a factory decision? Like, did they run out of white stroke? Did they want to run out of piping in the factory? I've never seen a decision like this. The Boston Red Sox did something very similar, and their uniforms looked horrible. I think they might still have those road uniforms that took away the red and white stroke from the Boston logo, but they looked terrible for a while. This is a move akin to Great Britain's uniforms in the World Baseball Classic, which were also a tragedy to graphic design. The Yankees' moves sometimes puzzle me. I mean, they've had obviously a beard policy in place since 1976, so all their players look like they're going to play baseball as tax accountants from H&R Block. Their moves puzzle me. I don't know how this conversation even goes. Like, why was this a problem? Was there something different? I remember hearing them even aggressively pursuing in an article, maybe about 3 years ago, that they were aggressively pursuing a City Connect jersey, right? Which was unthinkable at the time for the Yankees to even do such a thing. But they were aggressively pursuing that. I think that has been dead. But now we have an environment where the Mets, on the other side, are going to debut their new City Connect jersey at the end of April. And they're going to have a lot of fun with it. They're going to sell probably millions of jerseys. The 7 line's going to have a hoot with it. And hopefully the design is good. The last couple designs for the City Connect jerseys have been terrible. I don't think it matters. I think they've been selling. Baltimore is the perfect example. Baltimore's the Orioles City Connect jersey looks horrible. The Padres uniform, I don't know the derivation of it, but it does not look like it was designed by a human. It looks like something that was designed by AI. The Padres uniform is awful. The Royals, I think, actually looks pretty slick. I like Seattle's. But the Yankees were like, nope, you know what? We're not doing City Connect. We're not going to have fun here. We're going to take away another element of our design to make it more simple, to make it more akin to what? To, again, the Confederate uniform that Mickey Mantle was wearing in the 70s. My God, that uniform looked heavy. Anyways, so the Yankees are making their thing more simple. They're making their road uniforms more simple. I hope that they actually finally do. I hope that they finally do change the uniform to something a little bit, or get a City Connect jersey, get something a little bit different. They had those black jerseys for a while. I don't know if they just did those in spring training or if they did them in an actual season, but they looked interesting. The inverse. I thought for a long time the City Connect jersey for the Yankees should be the inverse of the pinstripes. It should be the navy blue uniforms with white pinstripes. I think that would look kind of interesting, but maybe it would be too close to the White Sox. It'd be interesting to see that design, but I'd like to see everybody's what they think the New York Yankees City Connect jersey should be. That would be kind of a cool thing, cool submission thing to do. But yeah. So Yankees are changing the uniforms back. Let's talk BeeKeeper. This is a movie, again, I decided to go to the movies, was trying to kind of keep up, trying to see something new every single week. And I ended up seeing Jim Gaffigan in a comedy show recently. Ended up seeing The BeeKeeper on a movie at the movies earlier in the week. Was two very, very different shows. Let's be clear. But saw The BeeKeeper. There hasn't been a lot in the movies as of late, which is kind of disappointing as a person who really loves going to the movies, right? And misses that experience being a good one, whether it's ruined by just generally the state or condition of the movie theater. The pandemic obviously took out movie theaters for... Essentially, it's still doing it, right? I feel like the movie theaters are still in a state of recovery. As a person who used to love and espouse the Alamo, I kind of feel like they're starting to kind of slip a little bit. Like the experience of going there is no longer really novel anymore. AMC's like upping their tickets. Like the movies are literally throwing things in front of themselves to trip over as an experience. And especially considering we're all in an on-demand world, right? We're all, have TVs that are sometimes larger than the screen itself. I feel like there hasn't been much since Oppenheimer came out that I really was like, I need to see this in theaters. I went to see Oppenheimer twice. Went to go see it in theaters. I loved that experience. Then I went to go see it in IMAX. Didn't like it as much. I didn't like the whole, different sizes and aspect ratios of the screen. But maybe that's just me as a videographer kind of noticing that was really distracting to me. I'm like, did they pan and scan to get this thing to fit on the weird aspect ratio of the screen? I don't quite understand IMAX, but I haven't seen that many movies. I've seen that and like Harry Potter on the IMAX theater, which is probably not what the IMAX is meant for. But anyway, let's hit this. This is the trailer here for the BeeKeeper. And again, the BeeKeeper was not a movie that I expected to be seeing. Jason Statham as an actor, I feel like I always associate him with the movie Crank, I think it was called. And I think that movie just defined his career. It's always Jason Statham. I don't know what the character's name was here. I can't even remember. I just know it's Jason Statham acting like Jason Statham in a Jason Statham movie. And that, I feel like that should probably sum up the movie. But it's actually a pretty interesting plot. I think it's something very different. It's funny in a weird way. Like if you come into this movie just thinking that it's going to be over the top and you're just going to have a fun time with the fight scenes, the choreography, the acting is, nothing to write home about. But it's one of those movies where if you're going to go to the bathroom in the middle of the film, you're going to come back and you might have missed something, but you really have missed absolutely nothing. Excuse me. You've really missed absolutely nothing of critical importance to the plot. It is one of those movies. I believe that's Josh Hutcherson plays the villain, if I can pronounce his name right. It is a fun movie altogether. Felicia Rashad plays essentially the person who's being taken advantage of by these cyber criminals. Interesting to see her. It was kind of surprising. I didn't see the trailer before I actually had seen the movie. And I was like, what's Claire Huxtable doing in this movie? But she plays a good job. There's this scene right here that literally made me kind of cackle in my chair just because, again, it's so over the top. But in a landscape where we have these very serious action movies, we have the Dead Reckonings, we have the we have Top Gun, right? We have James Bond, who's the Daniel Craig James Bond, which is ultra serious. This kind of takes you back to that Pierce Brosnan kind of era where Bond was silly and Bond was something that was a little bit more, carefree. I think this is that movie with Jason Statham. It's just such a bizarre plot. It basically is about a secret society called the BeeKeepers that kind of bring justice to people. The film just wildly changes stylistically in the middle of the film. And it's fine because it's such a good action movie to see. It's I would recommend go seeing it. It's something different from the normal superhero movie that has been kind of dominating the landscape. So if you need something to see and you're not interested in seeing, something like Poor Things with Emma Stone or the what else has like been having Oscar buzz, or the Boys in the Boat, if that's still out in theaters. If you're not interested in seeing those things, or if you're not interested in seeing any of the new Marvel or DC or Aquaman or anything like that, those things don't appeal to you. This is a standard by the numbers action movie, kind of reminiscent almost of a Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme kind of film, except it's just fast. It's, it never really stops once it gets going. I missed the first 10 minutes of the movie just because we had come in late, and it didn't matter because it was such a good movie. I don't even care. I don't even know what the beginning was like, but at least the hour and 30 I caught was good enough for me to recommend it. Go see The BeeKeeper. It is a good movie. It's Jason Statham being Jason Statham in a Jason Statham movie. And if you don't know what that means, watch any Jason Statham movie. It's I feel like he's one of those actors like Nicolas Cage. You don't need to even say what the plot is. You just say, Nicolas Cage is in a movie, and you know exactly what you're getting into. Anyways, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Prince of Persia, and then we're probably going to wrap up the episode. Next week on the podcast, I will be traveling, so I'm going to try to record it a little bit earlier, right after the conference championship game, probably on Monday. So it won't be up to date, but won't be basically recorded on Friday to put out on Sunday. But I'll try to get it out, make sure that we never stop. This train don't stop on this podcast. So let's take a quick break again. We're going to run the commercial, and we'll be back again with Prince of Persia, the Ubisoft game. Let's go.
Hey, this is Mark Powell from Powell Not Found, and this is the home of the Powell Not Found podcast, a podcast where we talk about the things, I want to talk about. I know, it's a little self-serving. On this podcast, we're talking baseball, we're talking New York Yankees, we're talking comedy, we're talking video games, we're talking, things I want to talk about. Again, it's a very self-serving premise. In order to grow this channel into what I want it to become, I'm going to need a little bit of your help though. If you can go to the YouTube channel and hit subscribe, and go to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the show, every little bit will count. Who knows, maybe we can take this podcast from a one-man show in someone's apartment to filling up Yankee Stadium with people hungry for content. Again, I'm trying to keep the goals attainable. New episodes are out every single Sunday at 8 a.m. And thank you guys for watching the show.
She's been dancing to the music blaring from the Renegade.
Hey, and we're back. We got two more things to go before we close. We're going to have the song of the day, which is My Lovely Laura, which again is going to be found on powellnotfound.bandcamp.com. Just redesigned that site so it looked a little bit similar to everything that we're pushing out. I launched a TikTok of Powell Not Found podcast. I am probably, out of my depths publishing a TikTok. But I'll be TikToking, is that how you say it? On Powell Not Found on TikTok. So you can also subscribe to that. I don't really know what I'm doing on that platform, but it's kind of fun. That's like the fun part of it, right? Is not knowing what you're doing and just kind of posting. Like I posted this commercial and I was like, I don't feel like this commercial would actually go on TikTok. I feel like this is like a YouTube-like commercial. So... but we're figuring it out. Let's talk the song of the day before we get to Prince of Persia here. This is My Lovely Laura. I wrote this song. Basically, this was the first song that I feel like I really wrote where I had something going. I had something cooking. I was fresh out of college and was kind of fiddling with my guitar. I love writing in the key of A minor. And kind of wrote this about just like a relationship kind of like gone gone sideways a little bit, and it was kind of, I think, pulling just like all these kind of like little stanzas of like, oh my gosh, we're gonna do, all these things together, and we're gonna try to take over the world together. And so I came up with this little stanza going, stick around and hit the ground with you, right? And which meant kind of like we're gonna go forward, and put it to this tune, and didn't end up recording this until I got to Atlanta, until I lived there, and I recorded it with my buddy Will, and he did a great job, kind of editing together my takes. And when I first heard his rendition of it, which I'm going to play for you in a second, I was kind of stunned that the recording session was able to do this. So whatever editing prowess he did in the background, I think that deserves a lot of recognition, because when I left the studio, I was like, I'm not sure if this actually worked out. But let's hit My Lovely Laura, and then we'll come back talking Prince of Persia. And let me raise those levels again, doing production on the fly. All right, and this is My Lovely Laura, a 2012 Powell Not Found song.
She gave me a look with the weight of the moon. She kept me in line to the beat of a tune. Amidst the scene of a made-up foreign land, she'd be the queen and I'd be a man. Ho ho. I ran for my life, the capital L. I just couldn't break the bonds of a spell. And as I ran, a free man, true and true, couldn't help but go back. What could I do without you? My lovely Laura, oh, won't you stick around and hit the ground with me? My lovely Laura, oh, won't you stick around and hit the ground? My lovely Laura. I won't be hurt like yesterday. This time around, I'll be saved. My lovely Laura, oh, won't you stick around and hit the ground with me? My lovely Laura, oh, won't you stick around and hit the ground? My lovely Laura. Here I stand, straight from the line, void of my voice, void of my spine. That sentimental inclination you say I lack, so far removed, how will I get it back? My lovely Laura, oh, won't you stick around and hit the ground with me? My lovely Laura, oh, won't you stick around and hit the ground? My lovely Laura.
Hey, welcome back. That was My Lovely Laura. Man, that last harmony, I'm not even sure what notes those are. I couldn't reproduce it if I tried. But yeah, that was My Lovely Laura, again, that was off the Benefit of the Doubt album that came out in like 2013. Again, available on the powellnotfound.bandcamp.com. That album, when I listened back to it, I realized that's what it sounds like when you produce an album when you really don't know how to record on GarageBand and you don't put any effects in your voice. So it's a very raw album. Not particularly those two that track. I recorded another one called Spiderweb. Maybe I'll show that next week. That's a slower song. And that's what we need. We need some slower songs. We need to slow down life a little bit. Maybe I'll show that next week. But yeah, that album was basically recorded in a Hoboken apartment and with not a lot of frills and not a lot of technical know-how. It was just me kind of learning as I kind of went along. But so anyways, so let's close out the show here. Let's talk some Prince of Persia and the Lost Crown, a Ubisoft joint that came out recently. This is a video game, a Metroidvania, as they call it, a maze game. Let's just call it a maze game. No one knows what Metroidvania is outside of video games. I mean, people know what Metroid is. People know what Castlevania is. No one knows that term outside the video game industry. It is a maze game. It's basically, ancient war kind of setting. Someone has been kidnapped. The Prince of Persia has been kidnapped, and you, as a character, are going to try to find him fighting. I played the demo of this game in full to completion, and then I picked up the actual game, played about an hour, 2 hours of it. Hard game. It's like the combat is a little bit rough. Like it felt like the first thing when I picked it up, it kind of felt like a Dark Souls-esque game where you're really going to have to be on it. You're going to have to parry. You're going to have to kind of learn the ins and outs of combat. Otherwise, you're not getting that far. Months ago, I played Metroid Dread to completion, and that game also, while difficult, while part of the Hard Games Club, was not insurmountable. At points, it was tough. But this one, in the first areas, I feel like I was getting my ass kicked a little bit, and I really had to kind of like sit down and go, oh shoot, I got to actually learn this battle system, which I do not have time to do. Good on them for having this. This game really challenges you, right? It also kind of sets you up a little bit. The demo gives you more power than you actually have in those areas, and makes you feel like you're kind of gonna be a badass in this game. You're gonna be a little bit of overpowered, and you're gonna be steamrolling through enemies. That's not what it's like in the real game. They give you an actual disclaimer in the demo saying, like, we've streamlined some things to make sure this thing kind of goes, right? So they're giving you like a vertical slice, but a very different vertical slice of what the game will actually be. And that's why I was a little bit taken aback when I first started to play the game. Then I was like, oh, this is very, very different. This is very, very hard, and it offers you a challenge. The only criticism I have with the game is that the game gives you missions and stuff and gives you objectives but I felt myself even in the first hour going, geez, I kind of have a lack of direction here about where I'm supposed to go. I'm heading to the forest right now. I'm talking to different characters. I'm still discovering that thing, but there's not a clear like, hey, I need to go this direction. I'm really in the exploratory phase and kind of getting my butt whooped in combat at this point, which is still fun. It's a nice departure from Dead Cells, which, at this point I'm transitioning. I'm playing that game kind of in the background when I have like, a little bit of time on my hands. And that game where you can feel just so powerful so quickly. This is kind of interesting where it's like, it's more of a methodical, like let's figure out this combat and figure out this different thing. But it's such a clean departure. I like Metroidvania games. I think I came to them very, very late. Started playing like Axiom Verge when that came out, and kind of got on the bandwagon there and started playing more and more of them because I was not a Super Metroid guy when I was a kid. I did not rent that game. I didn't even know that game existed. And there was no indication, even when I was younger, to go pick up a Nintendo Power and discover that game. That didn't happen. So I came to them very, 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 very late. So, but again, this one's really cool. They also do kind of fix a thing that happens in a lot of Metroidvania games where it's like you can't remember where the hell the thing was. So they give you this kind of stone that basically, you can put down a stone or put down a marker basically where something significant is in the game, and you can kind of like record a picture of it, if you will, and that will kind of help you kind of navigate. And they also give you markers on the map to kind of figure out your way, and really like it's a do-it-yourself kind of thing. They're not going to list out the things for you like a lot of open world games do. They're making you do that tactile marking of the map, which I think is a really, really good addition to this game. But so far, at my time, I'm really enjoying the game. I'm hoping to get further in. I'll probably talk a little bit more about it in the future. But this Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown game, I would go pick it up. Or at the very least, play the demo and see how you feel by it. And know that that's not indicative of how the game is played in the very, very beginning. They're going to gradually, I'm assuming, lead you up to something that's a little bit, give you powers as you kind of go along and kind of make you feel like the all-time badass by the end of the game. But the demo kind of gives you that power a little bit too early. So I feel so weak now in the beginning of the game. But again, that's Prince of Persia and The Lost Crown. And that's out by Ubisoft. And go pick it up. It's $50 on the Nintendo Switch. I believe it's on. Is it on other? It's got to be on other platforms, right? This is not a Switch exclusive, is it? Let me double check here. Ubisoft, Prince of Persia, Lost Crown. It is on PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, and Microsoft Windows and Amazon Luna, according to Google. Luna. Does anybody know what the Amazon Luna is? I don't. So. In terms of performance, if you're wondering about the performance of the game, it's pretty good on Switch. I haven't seen any hitches or anything like that. I'll tell you one thing: when I was playing Dead Cells, you definitely see hitches when you play Dead Cells. Dead Cells will physically stop on the Switch sometimes because when there's a lot of stuff going on. And maybe that's just my Switch, maybe that's just a hardware thing, but man, it is noticeable. And so with that being said, so far, no performance issues. The one thing I will say about the Prince of Persia game is that it is the death animation and the hit animation is so ridiculous, and it's a little bit drawn out. It sometimes takes you a little bit out of the action a little bit. So just be aware of that. That's just, to me, it's kind of like a little bit distracting. It's a really cool effect, but man, it does take you a little bit out of the action when you do it. Maybe I'll get used to it as time goes on. But with that said, I got to get going here on the 4th episode of the Powell Not Found podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. Again, I am Mark Powell. I probably should have said that in the beginning of the show. I am the host, and you can subscribe to the channel and listen to the podcast on YouTube. You can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and every little bit helps and will count. We are on Instagram at Powell Not Found Podcast. We are on Twitter, just as myself, as Powell Not Found, and we are on the TikTok as Powell Not Found. So go ahead and subscribe, like those channels, interact with the posts. I'll be putting up probably, I'll be on travel next week, so I'll be putting up an episode a little bit early. But thank you guys for watching the show. This one's gone on a little bit long, so we're going to see how this one turns out. And thank you guys for tuning in. This is the Powell Not Found podcast, and we'll see you next week.
I'm gonna tell you
Goodbye.
a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming. We tried